Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down the best pick in every single round from rounds 1 through 13 of your 2024 fantasy football drafts. We're going to be discussing who I believe is the best target in every single round from rounds 1 through 13 in depth so you guys can understand how I am looking at each round. Now, the reason why we don't include rounds 14 and 15 is because in most leagues in round 14 and 15, you are going to be taking your kicker and your defense. But before we get on into this breakdown, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into the best pick in every round of your 2024 fantasy football drafts. We begin with the best pick inside of round number 1. While technically that would be Christian McCaffrey, even with dealing with the injury right now, I am not overwhelmingly concerned just yet. If we get into late August and he's still banged up, then obviously there would be some room to be concerned. Right now, the reason why we're not going to discuss Christian McCaffrey is because if you're not the first overall pick in 99.999% of drafts, you're not going to be able to get McCaffrey, and Bijan goes in the middle of round number 1. Bijan Robinson, running back of the Atlanta Falcons, aggregate ADP running back 3 at pick number 7. So when Christian McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown come off the board, that is when I really start to consider selecting Bijan Robinson, and a lot of the time he is available after those players. Currently, Breece Hall as well as Christian McCaffrey are going ahead of him, and I do have Bijan Robinson ranked ahead of Breece Hall. Now, I understand that last season, if you drafted Bijan Robinson, you were incredibly disappointed, and it wasn't really because he played all of that bad, but because every single fantasy analyst, me included, gave him the Gawk Gawk 9000 special. Ultimately, when he didn't finish inside of the top 5 or even the top 8 at the running back position, you end up disappointed. But this season, with a new coaching regime, with a quarterback that isn't an absolute and utter zero in Desmond Ridder, now they have Kirk Cousins, the new coaching staff, and a coaching staff that gives me a lot of confidence because they have talked about how they want to use Bijan Robinson as a workhorse running back. Makes me incredibly confident that Bijan Robinson inside of the first round is an amazing pick. To me, this guy has the upside, the skill set. We saw it at Texas. We even saw it last year in Atlanta, even though he didn't put up the big numbers, that this guy is incredibly talented and that this guy could easily be a smash in 2024. And it wouldn't shock me at all if we fast forward to next year's fantasy football drafts if Bijan Robinson was the number 1 overall pick. Last year, he ranked 5th in yards created, 9th in yards per touch, and 16th in true yards per carry. Again, I truly do believe that the best is yet to come for Bijan Robinson, and I expect his sophomore season to be dominant. At number 2, we got Garrett Wilson, wide receiver of the New York Jumbo Jets, aggregate ADP wide receiver 8. At pick number 14, the aggregate ADP, I didn't mention it for Bijan, is sourced from ESPN Sleeper, NFL, and RT Sports. Now, Garrett Wilson, just like Bijan Robinson, was someone that people were banging the drum for aggressively last season. People were talking up. People were talking about how Garrett Wilson has the upside to be the wide receiver 1. We were discussing how Bijan Robinson has the upside to be the running back number 1, and obviously none of those scenarios ended up unfolding. But Garrett Wilson was heavily dunked in the water by the fact that Aaron Rodgers ended up getting hurt 0.5 seconds into the 2023 NFL season. If we run things back, right, we live in an alternate reality, Doctor Strange style, then maybe Garrett Wilson ends up as a top 5 wide receiver last season had Aaron Rodgers have been healthy. Now, obviously, we live in the reality where Aaron Rodgers runs out with the American flag and his Achilles pops within 7 seconds. But at the end of the day, we have to acknowledge that the upside was there, and Garrett Wilson still had a fine season. Now, obviously, when your starting quarterback is Zach Wilson and you have Trevor Siemian throwing you the ball as well, that is obviously a recipe for disaster. Garrett Wilson was the wide receiver 26 in PPR and 33 in PPR points per game. He ranked 4th in terms of targets, 13th in terms of receptions, 22nd in receiving yards, and 58th in total touchdowns, despite ranking 11th in total route wins at the wide receiver position. While I do believe that there is a chance that Aaron Rodgers isn't his former self, right? That Aaron Rodgers isn't the back-to-back discount double-check State Farm man that he used to be, there is a very good chance that even if he's just 75% of that Garrett Wilson is still putting defenses in the figure 4. He looked so good last season. The stats just don't show you that. If you go ahead and watch the games, you'll realize that Garrett Wilson was open a bunch, that there were just terrible balls being thrown his way. I think in 2024, we see a very clear bounce back season. And if he's seeing around 10 targets per game, which I think is entirely plausible due to the wide receivers around Garrett Wilson in this offense, then there is an easy path to destroying his ADP as the wide receiver 8 and finishing inside of the top 5. At number 3, we got James "Let Him Cook," running back of the Buffalo Bills, aggregate ADP running back 14 at pick 35. Now, the story of last season for James Cook was the change in offensive coordinator. Once about halfway into the season, when the Buffalo Bills were looking relatively mid, they cut bait on their offensive coordinator, and once that occurred, the whole season changed for the team as well as James Cook. We started to see James Cook see a lot more touches at a consistent basis, and we saw the Buffalo Bills go from a team that was potentially going to miss the playoffs to making it into the 2023 NFL playoffs and looking like a much better team. Now, James Cook obviously benefited from that because he was seeing more touches, and they are running with the same offensive coordinator this season. Now, the biggest issue for James Cook last year was the touchdowns. It's been an issue for his whole entire 2 years through the NFL process thus far. The guy has not been able to find pay dirt at a high level. Now, is that because James Cook is some complete and utter fucking bum who can't mosey his way on into the end zone? The answer to that would be no. The real answer is that Josh Allen is stealing a lot of his touchdowns. Now, that is going to be the case yet again in 2024, but I think it is very unlikely that we see Josh Allen score 15 rushing touchdowns like he did last season, and that should pave a way towards James Cook potentially scoring 8 or more total touchdowns, which could elevate him past his ADP, which is running back 14 off the board at pick 35. He was the running back 19 last year in PPR points per game and the running back 12 in PPR. He ranked 10th in carries, 4th in rushing yards, 19th in targets, 17th in receptions, 8th in receiving yards, and 24th in total touchdowns, ranking 3rd in expected points added at the running back position, 5th in yards per touch, and 12th in true yards per carry. Now, I understand that Stephon Diggs leaving, saying bye-bye, going all the way to Houston to chill with the NASA boys could end up being an issue for the Bills offense. They bring in Keon Coleman, they bring in Curtis Samuel, they still have Khalil Shakira, so they have some options to throw the ball to. Obviously, Dalton Kincaid, and while I do think that will subdue the offense slightly, I still think the Buffalo Bills will end up being a lot better than people give them the credit for right now, and I think that this offense will be good enough for James Cook to get those touchdowns. I understand that the touchdown number at the running back, the wide receiver position is like a yo-yo, right? It goes up and it goes down. Some players, their touchdown numbers are sticky. Like Christian McCaffrey, that dude just fucking loves being in the end zone. But a guy like James Cook wouldn't really be all that much of a shock to me if the number goes higher. And I think right now as the running back 14, there is a very believable scenario where the season ends and he's a top 8 running back, again, due to the volume that he should receive in the Bills offense. At number 4, round number 4, we got Trey McBride, tight end of the Arizona Cardinals, aggregate ADP tight end 4 at pick number 48. Now, Trey McBride is a guy that a lot of the time you are going to see fall into the 5th round. So you will see Travis Kelce come off the board at the end of the second or the early third round. You'll see Sam Laporta go in a similar range. And then you can get Trey McBride at the end of the fourth round or the early fifth round. So you are getting a 2-round discount, basically, or more of a discount every single time on Trey McBride compared to those other guys. Now, I get it, right? Nick, they should be going 2 rounds higher because Travis Kelce is Travis Kelce, and we saw Sam Laporta have a huge season last year, and I get it, right? Those guys are a little bit more cemented at the tight end position compared to Trey McBride. But the fact that Trey McBride is now the tight end 4 off the board, to me, is very, very shocking because Trey McBride is my tight end number 3, and I would not bat an eye at the end of this season if he ends up as the tight end number 1. He was the tight end 7 in PPR last year and the tight end 8 in PPR points per game. It is important to understand that Trey McBride wasn't even the starting tight end at the beginning of last season while Zach Ertz was healthy. 17 games played with 12 starts, ranking 6th in targets, 5th in receptions, 7th in receiving yards, and ranking with just 3 total touchdowns, 18th in terms of efficiency, 5th in target separation, 5th in fantasy points per route run, 6th in yards per team pass attempt, and 3rd in true catch rate. It's also important to understand that Kyler Murray wasn't even playing for all of last season as he only played in half of the games. Also important to note that Kyler Murray was coming off of the torn ACL, the torn meniscus, which led to him not really looking like his old self. But I believe Kyler Murray is going to look like that old version of himself. He's going to be a lot more mobile compared to what we saw last season, even though he was running a decent amount. And the addition of Marvin Harrison Jr., Maserati Marv, into this offense, I think is going to push this offense into high gear, and I believe that is going to lead to Trey McBride having an amazing season at the tight end position. Again, for me, it is really just the value of Trey McBride that leads me to loving him inside of the late 4th or even inside of the early 5th round, and that is because you are getting such a discount on McBride compared to Kelce or Sam Laporta. Trey McBride is another one of those guys that was kind of just locked out of the end zone last year. Only 3 total touchdowns, and based upon the skill set of Trey McBride, based upon the fact that the guy is getting open at an incredibly high rate, should tell you that the touchdown number is bound to go up. I expect the Arizona Cardinals offense to make a lot of the detractors feel like absolute fucking buffoons. This guy, Trey McBride, last season had 4 games with over 20 PPR points. He ripped off 20 points up against the Niners, 22 points up against the Steelers, and 21 points up against the Falcons, and then 25 points up against the Baltimore Ravens. I understand that he wasn't very consistent early on in the season, but that was because he wasn't the main tight end. Once he took over, this dude was absolutely skull-fucking defenses game in and game out, and I think a lot of people are sleeping on Trey McBride just because they haven't seen it at a super high level for a whole season, right? Everyone is ready to give the Suka Lamink special to Sam Laporta after 1 year of production, but just because Trey McBride didn't start off on the right foot last season, they're a little bit more worried, so he's the tight end number 4. I think he should very clearly be ranked inside of the top 3. He is in my tier number 1 at the tight end position. If you want to check out my tiered PPR rankings, you can check out the Patreon link in the video description. Moving to round number 5, we got Zay Flowers, wide receiver of the Baltimore Ravens, aggregate ADP wide receiver 26 at pick 54. Now, Zay Flowers, as a rookie, finished as the wide receiver 31 in PPR and wide receiver 32 in PPR points per game, playing in 16 games last season, getting over 100 targets, 26th at wide receiver, 22nd in receptions, 33rd receiving yards, and 27th in total touchdowns. Though the efficiency will tell you that despite his stats in his rookie year, his stats in his rookie year, he was 7th in target separation, 6th in route win rate, and 18th in snap share at the wide receiver position, that those numbers are ready to boom like the Costco guys, right? Shout out the Rizzler as well. Now, Zay Jones really started to put things together towards the end of last season. Now, he was solid early on. He comes out the gate week number 1 of his rookie year, drops his nuts onto the forehead of the Houston Texans with over 17 fantasy points. But towards the end of the season, he ripped off 23, 20. Then he had a low scoring game with only 1 point, 22, and 19 PPR points down the stretch. And the production did not stop in the playoffs. He had a pretty mid-game up against the Texans, but then up against the Chiefs. With all the marbles on the table, he had 20 PPR points. I understand that on paper, the Ravens aren't the most interesting offense in terms of the passing attack, right? This is an offense that isn't going to be throwing the ball at an incredibly high clip. But this is a team that has a quarterback in Lamar Jackson who I'm confident in and is kind of doesn't really have a lot of targets outside of Zay Flowers or Mark Andrews. So I think we are going to be seeing a huge leap in the second year of Zay Flowers. Again, what I saw at the end of last season shows me that the upside is significant. And if he is able to just get a little bit more consistent as the wide receiver 26 off the board, I think he could be a very reliable top 20, top 18 wide receiver with top 5 upside at the wide receiver position any given week. Moving to round number 6 here, we got David Montgomery, running back of the Detroit Lions, aggregate ADP running back 23 at pick. Get your kicks en route 66. Now, David Montgomery last season was a guy that I talked up heavily. While I loved Jahmyr Gibbs, and I still love Jahmyr Gibbs, we all kind of knew what was going to happen, right? They were going to use the just the tip technique with Jahmyr Gibbs. They were going to ease him in. And while I do think they're going to take back the restrictions, take back the restraints on Jahmyr Gibbs this season, I still do believe, due to the build of David Montgomery and due to the fact that Dan Campbell is still going to give him a bunch of touches, that David Montgomery is not only a very reliable running back 2 for your team week in and week out, David Montgomery also has that untapped upside on if Jahmyr Gibbs was to go down, which we have already seen in the offseason with a hamstring injury. And we know that hamstring injuries tend to linger. David Montgomery is one injury away from being a top 8 running back every single week in my weekly rankings video and on my rankings on Patreon. If you guys want to hit that subscribe button down below if you haven't already, I talk about my running back, wide receiver, quarterback, tight end rankings every single week throughout the season. Now, is David Montgomery one of the best running backs in the NFL? No, David Montgomery is far from one of the best running backs in the NFL. But with an offensive line like the Lions have, which is a brick fucking wall out front of David Montgomery, and with a coach in Dan Campbell who you know wants to give him the ball in the red zone, David Montgomery is going to have that consistency when Jahmyr Gibbs is in the games, right? He's going to be that top 24 back every single week. Now, is David Montgomery going to win you your league and become this top 10 back when Gibbs is healthy? Probably not. But amongst the dead zone running backs, David Montgomery feels like the most safe option while being just one Jahmyr Gibbs slip up from fantasy football superstardom and winning you your league. Last year, he ranked 17th in true yards per carry, but the defenses were loading the box on him, 6th in terms of defenders in the box. He ranked 4th in the NFL in total touchdowns at the running back position, and I think we see a very similar year of production out of David Montgomery, where he's going to have those big spike weeks where he gets 2 or more touchdowns in a certain game, and if he doesn't end up scoring multiple touchdowns, he'll probably just be solid for you. While he doesn't have the most amount of upside, in my opinion, I think having a safe running back too, while you can take those shots later on in the draft on guys with super high upside, and then if something was to happen to Jahmyr Gibbs again, knock on wood, we don't root for injuries, David Montgomery will pay off in a huge way at ADP. At number 7, we got Jaden Riley-Reed, wide receiver of the Green Bay Packers, aggregate ADP wide receiver 35 at pick 80. Now, I'm seeing a lot of people that are talking about preseason week number 1. They're worried about the snap usage, this, that, and the other thing, and they're ready to turn the car in reverse on Jaden Reed, despite the fact that this dude was 4th in fantasy points per touch for rookies over the last decade. The only wide receivers that ranked ahead of him in fantasy points per touch for rookies over the last decade were these guys, you probably heard of them: Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and Odell Beckham Jr. Those are a great quality of dudes to be around Jayden Reed. It tells you just how good Jayden Reed might be, even though people aren't ready to roll out the red carpet for him. I understand that they have Christian Watson. I understand that they have Dontavian Wicks. They have Bo Melton. They have Romeo Dobbs. But I think that all of these guys are going to be able to have decent games. And if Jayden Reed ends up as the #1 target, which I believe could be incredibly likely, then Jayden Reed will be the consistent one, and the other ones will have their spike games. As the wide receiver 35 off the board at pick number 80, again, as you get deeper and deeper into the drafts, you want to be taking more deep, high upside shots. And if you believe, like I believe, that Jordan Love Me Tender, Love Me Sweet is legit, and he's not some 1 year, 1-hit wonder Fugazi fraud, then Jayden Reed could really have an even better season than last year, where he was the wide receiver 25 in PPR, 26 in PPR points per game, 17 games played with 13 starts, 94 targets, 5.9 per game, 40th, 64 receptions, 4 per game, 35th, 793 receiving yards, 49.6 per game, 35th, and he had 10 total touchdowns. He was 5th in fantasy points per target, 36th in target accuracy, 8th in fantasy points per route run, and 22nd in route win rate. To me, when you look at the wide receiver core in Green Bay, he seems like the best bet to be the #1 wide receiver, which is why he's coming off the board as the #1 wide receiver on the Green Bay Packers. While I like the other guys, and I certainly will be drafting them because I am enamored with the upside of this Green Bay Packers, the Matt LaFleur system. I think last season as a rookie shows you how good Jayden Reed could be, and I think that Jayden Riley Reed is going to be even better in 2024. Again, I want to attach players on great teams to my offense, to my fantasy football attack, and I want Jayden Reed on my team. Again, this is a Packers team that I have been given the Hawk Tua to all season, and I'm going to continue to do it because I'm a huge fan of Jordan Love. And I really do believe that Jayden Reed is the #1 guy. At number 8, we have Javonte Williams. Now, I understand that I've talked about Javonte Williams a lot recently, but that is really because I have completely changed my thought process on Javonte Williams. I was as out as you could get, but now I am all the way in. Running back of the Denver Broncos, aggregate ADP, running back 32 at pick 91. Running back 32 is what really pulls me in on Javonte Williams. What also pulls me in is all of the beat reports and the preseason week #1 game. Now, I will tell you with a straight face that preseason week #1 and any preseason game shouldn't necessarily be the gospel, right? Now, as you get deeper and deeper into the preseason games, when the starters start to play a little bit more, if that is the case, depending on the team, because, some teams, they just won't fucking play the starters at all. Some teams will give the starters more time. What I will tell you is, while you shouldn't take it as the gospel, you should at least take it with a grain of salt and look at it. Javonte Williams was the clear running back 1 in that game, and Javonte Williams, according to all of the beat reporters, is clearly the best running back and looks like his old self. He's now 18 plus months removed from the ACL injury, which makes a lot of sense because the team threw Javonte Williams out to the Wolves last season, right? This guy was 17th in carries coming off of a torn ACL. Was he productive? The answer to that would be, fuck no, baby. He was 53rd in yards per touch, 59th in true yards created, though I will note that he was getting a bit fucked because the defense was loading the box against him, 5th in average defenders in the box. He ranked 17th in carries, 28th in rushing yards, 17th in targets, 16th in receptions, 26th in receiving yards, and 30th in total touchdowns. I understand they have Samaje P. Ryan, who literally was fucking juggling the ball in that game that we saw in preseason. They have Audric Estime, Jaleel McLaughlin as well. But to me, it seems like Javonte's the clear #1. They're going to take Javonte off every once in a while to give Jaleel or Samaje P. Ryan the ball. But Javonte Williams, to me, based on everything that I have read, is just buried in the rankings. Like, we are talking about this motherfucker in the range of some guys that I don't even think can hold this guy's jockstrap just in terms of talent. I get that has Javonte Williams lived up to the expectations that many had on him coming out of college? Honestly, the answer to that, I think, would be no. But I think with Sean Payton being the head coach of the team and with Sean Payton producing fantasy football running backs for us over the years, I think that you should be taking that shot on Javonte Williams, because not only does it feel like a safe shot, like the safest running back in this range, he also probably has the most upside because he's the starting running back, the clear number one on a team that should be at least okay. Again, like, are they going to be one of the best offenses in the NFL with Bo Nix in year number one? Probably not, right? I don't suspect that Bo Nix is going to turn into CJ Stroud from last season, right? And just absolutely shock everyone. But I think that Javonte Williams and this Broncos team are going to be okay. And I think Javonte Williams could even be great. And again, he's coming off the board as a running back 32, and I think he could be a reliable top 24 back. In round number 9, we move to Keon Coleman, wide receiver of the Buffalo Bills, aggregate ADP wide receiver 44 at pick 101. Shout out to Zoe. Now, Keon Coleman is a wide receiver that I was also kind of out on, just like Javonte Williams, right? I was thinking Keon Coleman rookie year, you watch his tape, you look at his stats, and it really, to me, the stats are definitely nothing special, right? He never really arose in college to be a guy that I would expect to come off the board at pick 33 in the NFL draft, right? The 33rd overall pick in the 2024 NFL draft, to the no one circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. At FSU last season in 12 games as a 20-year-old, he had 50 receptions on 90 targets for 658 yards, 13.2 yards per reception with a 20.8% target share and 11 receiving touchdowns. Again, are those numbers terrible? Is it a shock that he actually got drafted? Of course not. He's a good player. You watch the tape, he looks solid, but a lot of people are talking about how raw he is. How he's a very raw prospect. It's going to take time to develop, right? And problem with that take is, while it might be true, right? While he might need time to develop into the second coming of fucking Megatron or something, what Bills fans want him to become, there's a very good chance that the team doesn't give a single fuck about the fact that he's a raw talent that he might need to practice and not be the number one receiver, this, that, and the other thing, right? That he needs to continue to build his game up to become the guy. The team, at least in preseason week 1, rolled him out there like the guy's a fucking NFL veteran, right? The wide receivers around him are Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, Terrell Shavers, Mac Hollins, Chase Claypool now out for the season, right? None of those guys are really level raisers at the wide receiver position. I understand that Curtis Samuel will have his 3 games this season where you think that he's amazing. You pick him up off the waiver wire, and then for 5 weeks in a row, the guy is an absolute scrub, and you started him for absolutely no reason. Josh Allen advocated to draft Keon Coleman. Josh Allen has said a couple of times how good he likes Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman's game is off the charts, is a quote from Josh Allen earlier on in the offseason process. And the beat reporters are doing that thing from Silicon Valley, right? Where they figure out how to jerk off the most amount of cocks at the exact same time. But instead of them being multiple different people, it's just one guy. It's Keon Coleman. They are stroking this dude like it's his job, like they're at a glory hole or something, all right? They love Keon Coleman. And Keon Coleman posted a 100% route participation with the starting wide receivers for the Bills in week number 1 of preseason. Again, don't take it as the holy gospel for fantasy football, but that is very telling. He also tied for the team lead with 3 targets, 27%. Now, again, the Bills weren't playing the whole game with the starters, right? It's not like Josh Allen and Keon Coleman weren't in there for 4 quarters battling. That was not the case. It's just a very, very minuscule sample size. But I think there's something to take from that, and that is that Josh Allen and the Bills heavily believe in Keon Coleman, even if the scouts, even if me, myself, and I didn't really believe in Keon Coleman earlier on. At number 10, round number 10, we move to the Gus Bus Edwards, running back of the Los Angeles Chargers, aggregate ADP running back 37 at pick 109. Now, yesterday, 8/14, August 14th, Offensive coordinator Greg Roman states on J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, it is to be decided right now who the running back one is. It's a competition. The opportunity is there, and these guys are going to get a lot of opportunities in the game. Now, I am someone that really likes J.K. Dobbins this offseason, right? I think that at ADP, going behind Gus Edwards, and with what we have seen out of J.K. Dobbins when he's healthy, he's a better running back than Gus Edwards. But we all know that J.K. Dobbins is the definition of injury prone. You Google injury prone, you go to the images, and the first picture is a picture of J.K. Dobbins smiling as he tears his ACL trying to hop into the shower, right? Now, I'm a big fan of J.K. Dobbins. I don't root for injuries, but we are going to call a spade a spade. While I like J.K. Dobbins at ADP, I think you can also like Gus Edwards, because Gus Edwards is a guy that doesn't get hurt lacing his cleats up before the game. This is a team that outside of J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, they have Isaiah Spiller. They also have Kamani Vidal, but Kamani Vidal might not end up making the team based upon the beat reports that I have read. Now, is Gus Edwards some amazing running back? No, but he scored 13 total touchdowns last year, fourth at the running back position, and he was facing stacked front carry percentages at a very high rate, second in defenders in the box, second in stacked front carry percentage. 24th in carries, 23rd in rushing yards, 69th in targets, 66th in receptions. This is a guy that's not going to be catching very many passes, and if you expect him to, you frankly just don't know ball, because that's not really going to happen. If he got 25 targets this season, I would genuinely be shocked. I'd be like that painting of the guy, or like that picture of the Home Alone kid on the box of the movie where he's like shocked, you know. Gus Edwards is good. He's a good player. Is he a great player? No. But he's on a team with Harbaugh that wants to run the fuck out of the ball. Instead of drafting a wide receiver early on in the 2024 NFL draft, they decide to draft a lineman, right? They want to build the wall to keep the defenses out. And I think that Gus Edwards is going to benefit from the heavy amount of touches that he can get. Is Gus Edwards the safest bet on earth? No, but I think he's the safer bet compared to J.K. Dobbins. And he's a 10th round pick. So again, we're just really searching for upside in this range. Moving to round number 11, we got Brian Robinson, wide receiver of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Aggregate ADP, wide receiver 49 at pick 122. While we give all the praise to Malik Neighbors, all the praise to Rome Odunze, to Marvin Harrison, Maserati Marv, Brian Thomas Jr. to me is the fourth best receiver in this class. This dude was the 23rd overall pick in the 2024 NFL Draft. 13 games played at LSU in 2023 at 21 years old. 68 in terms of receptions, 89 targets for 1,177 yards, 17.3 yards per reception, with 17 receiving touchdowns, and a 21.9% target share on the same LSU team that was having Malik Neighbors deal out back shots weekly. In terms of workout metrics, he ran a 4.33 40-yard dash, 98th percentile. 98th percentile speed score according to Player Profiler, 98th percentile catch radius, and 83rd percentile burst score. When you look at the roster, well, I do think that Christian Kirk will end up being the wide receiver one, and I understand there are some question marks about Christian Kirk due to preseason week one snap counts, but again, I'm telling you guys, you cannot look at the snap counts from week one and the biggest takeaway ever be that this is life or death. This is exactly what's going to happen in week one, this, that, and the other thing, because a lot of the times it's a bit of a liar. Now, again, you should take things from it. Javonte Williams, seeing all those snaps, very promising, right? Javonte Williams being the clear lead back, very promising. Based on the beat reports that you read, it makes sense, right? Both of those reports made sense based on what you heard from the beat reporters. Then you hear like, oh, Christian Kirk not going to be playing a lot in the two wide receiver sets. And then you start to think, who's the other receivers on the team besides Brian Thomas Jr.? You got a bunch of schlubs and Gabe fucking Davis. So it would make absolutely no sense that Christian Kirk wasn't out there. So, again, I'm not really panicking too much on that. I don't think Brian Thomas Jr., unless there's an injury to Christian Kirk, knock on wood, we don't root for injuries, Captain Kirk. I don't think that Brian Thomas will finish as the wide receiver one in terms of targets on this offense. But while I think it's not the most likely scenario, I think Brian Thomas Jr. could end up number one in terms of fantasy points. The Jaguars are a very underrated offense. They were a team that for a majority of last season were looking like they could be the AFC champions, right? We're looking like this is a team that strikes fear into the minds of defenses. Touchdown Jesus, Trevor Lawrence is looking great. And then obviously everything crumbles, right? Like Humpty Dumpty falling off the wall. Everything goes wrong. T-Law's hurt. And the team goes from literally the number one team in the AFC to not even making the fucking playoffs. And again, while I think that people give a lot of shit to Trevor Lawrence, because I get it, right? If you look at his stats, he hasn't really lived up to the prodigy, like all of the talk, the ball fondling that he got coming out of Clemson, coming into the NFL, right? I get that. Fully understand. And I get why people don't like Trevor Lawrence as much as, maybe Jaguars fans do, or that some people did really like. Again, this is a guy that was talked up to be the next great quarterback in the NFL, and I think he could still do that, right? I think Trevor Lawrence is pretty underrated, and I think Brian Thomas Jr., very underrated, again, coming off late in drafts. And the best part about it is, sure, not every rookie wide receiver comes out the gate on fire, right? Back in the day, it took half the fucking season for the guy to see some serious snaps. Now, we know that's not really the case anymore, right? We know that rookies are relied upon a lot earlier on in the season nowadays, but Brian Thomas Jr. is a guy that even as the wide receiver 2 in Jacksonville in an offense that should be productive, feels like a pretty high upside pick. At number 12, we got Pat Freiermuth, tight end of the Pittsburgh Steelers, aggregate ADP tight end 15 at pick 134. Now, last year, if you drafted Pat Freiermuth, while he wasn't some super high round pick, right? You didn't burn some heavy draft capital like when you drafted Kyle Pitts and the guy bent you over a table without the use of lube. Pat Freiermuth, it definitely hurt, right? He only played in 12 games, missed 5 games with a hamstring injury sustained in week number 4, and he was the tight end 28 in PPR points per game. Last season, Pat Freiermuth wasn't even listed on the guys to start most weeks for me. Now, there's a multitude of reasons why Pat Freiermuth wasn't successful last season, but to me, the main one was really just the quarterback play, right? Mitch Trubisky, you got Mason Rudolph, small hands, Kenny Pickett. None of it ended up working, right? And I understand they bring in Russell Wilson, who at this point in his career isn't the old Russell Wilson, Mr. Unlimited, right? They bring in Justin Fields, who is just about but at the end of the day, both of those guys are miles ahead of the quarterback play we saw last year in Pittsburgh for Freiermuth. Now, if you look back in 2022, he had 63 receptions on 98 targets for 732 receiving yards and 2 total touchdowns. The touchdown number could definitely increase, but that is a solid base to build upon. New offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith. I know you hear the name Arthur Smith, and it just, you can in your head, it just starts smelling like shit, right? Arthur Smith sucks, right? But Arthur Smith targeted the tight ends at the highest rate last season in Atlanta, and we should be seeing a lot of 2 tight end sets in Pittsburgh. You match the quarterback change with an offensive coordinator that wants to get the ball to the tight ends, and I think that Pat Freiermuth as the tight end 15 off the board is worth a shot. And I also think he's a guy that should be ranked higher coming in ADP. Again, tight end 15, he's ranked higher than that for me. Moving now to round number 13 before we break down Rico Dowdle, running back of the Dallas Cowboys. You might just get hit with Rico McMillan. Aggregate ADP running back 45 at pick 148. I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends and our sponsor over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, if you're new to Underdog Fantasy and are a first-time depositor, if you click on the link in the video description or use promo code Notorious, you will receive a first special pick plus a deposit bonus of up to $250. If you don't know what Underdog Fantasy is, they are the best way to play fantasy football, best ball in the summer. If you don't know what best ball is, it's the best part about fantasy football. It's the draft, and that's it. There's no waivers, there's no trades, and there's no in-season management. Underdog at the end of every single week will put the highest scores into your lineup for you, so you get to do the most fun things without having to do all the other tedious things. Their main tournament, $25 to enter, $1.5 million to first place. They're also going to have smaller tournaments released all summer long, so make sure you guys check that out. It's a great way to practice for your 2024 fantasy football leagues. Again, promo code Notorious, or click on the link in the video description. So Rico Dowdle, running back 50 in PPR last year, 57 in PPR points per game, but we're not going to even look at his stats because he never started a game. It doesn't really matter. 89 carries, 361 rushing yards, 22 targets, 17 receptions, 144 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns. Right, I read those off. Super fast mode, like a old Only Use Me Blade video. Super fast mode, like the Rap God song by Eminem. 18th in juke rate, 23rd in yards per touch, 9th in yards created per touch. Now, look, I'm still fine drafting Zeke, even though he's ancient. Even though he runs at the speed that old people have intercourse. At the end of the day, Ezekiel Elliott's still going to get touches. We just know that, right? That's just the Cowboys' way. Zeke's going to get the touches. He might even score 10 fucking touchdowns somehow. But what I will tell you is I think Rico Dowdle could easily leapfrog over him as the #1 running back. When you hear the coaches talk about Rico Dowdle, it sounds like they're ecstatic. And when they talk about Zeke, they're like, this is a guy that we're going to use, right? This is a guy that's blah, blah, blah. We're going to work him in, right? Whereas Rico Dowdle, they're basically getting down on their knees to talk about him, okay? And again, is Rico Dowdle one of the best running backs in the NFL? No, but his competition is Ezekiel Elliott. And again, I think Zeke doesn't get enough credit for what he did last season, and maybe he just doesn't give a single fuck in practice, right? He's just running in slow mode, even though he was running in slow-mo last year, right? He just doesn't care. He's getting wrapped up behind the line, and it just doesn't matter to him. Because it's like that old meme, right? Practice? What you talking about practice, right? He doesn't care about practice. He's going to go out there and ball out. But I still think Rico Dowdle is a nice high upside pick on a Dallas Cowboys offense that should be really good. They should be an offense that scores a lot of points. And if Rico Dowdle ends up being the 1B to Zeke's 1A, in a lot of scenarios, Rico Dowdle is going to have some very big games. Thank you guys all so much for watching. If you ended up enjoying today's video, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, make sure you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Check out the rankings link for the Patreon in the video description. I love you guys all. I'll see you guys soon with another banger of a video. Stay safe. As always, guys. Good boy.